Well, a very long time ago, it was decided that New Mexico would be a sacrifice zone. We have the cradle to grave process taking place here. The cradle is the opening up of the earth and the extraction of uranium. Um, indigenous people always knew that the uranium should stay in the earth and it should never be touched or bothered. But in New Mexico, across Navajo Nation, Laguna, and Acoma Pueblo, we have 1,000 abandoned uranium mine and mill sites where they extracted 32 million tons. I always tell people, try wrapping your mind around that, 32 million tons of uranium. And they basically left those mine sites abandoned, and they're all Superfund sites, and the tailings are still out there all across uh, the Navajo Nation, Laguna, and Acoma Pueblo. I've visited there, and it's a sight to see. I'll tell you, it's heartbreaking actually. So there's the mining of uranium. That's the cradle, and then we have the development and testing of nuclear devices in New Mexico. During the early years of development of nuclear devices, they freely dumped the waste from Los Alamos labs into the canyons there. Obviously, that became part of our watershed, eventually makes its way to the Rio Grande. Should be of concern to everybody who lives in New Mexico. This stuff just doesn't go away. And then we had the testing of nuclear devices. Everybody's familiar with Trinity, but we had three other tests. We had a test in advance of Trinity called the 100-ton test that took place out at White Sands Missile Range. It was a precursor to Trinity. They wanted to see what was going to happen with the fallout, so they used conventional explosives, laced it with plutonium, and tracked fallout. And then we had two plowshares tests in New Mexico, and a lot of people are not aware of this. This was in the 70s. We had one in the Four Corners area near Farmington. That one was called Gas Buggy. And then we had one near Carlsbad called Gnome. Um, and both of them vented a great deal of radiation, also never tracked or traced, just like Trinity. And then aside from that, we have the only permanent repository for nuclear waste any place in the United States at WIP. And New Mexico is under consideration now for a permanent repository for spent plutonium rods, high level waste. We were always promised when they established WIP that they would never bring high level waste here, but now we're under consideration for that, as much as the people of New Mexico, along with all of our elected officials, are against it. So that's the cradle to grave process, or the nuclear cycle that takes place in New Mexico. We've all been affected by it. I always tell people, you may not identify as a downwinder, but if you live in New Mexico, you're downwind of a nuclear site.
That's right. Yep. You're the one who taught me to say that we're all downwinders if we're here in New Mexico. And these past 2 years, I taught Intro to Southwest Studies. I reminded my students of that. And I reminded them that even if you're here short term, you are being exposed by default. Thank you so much, Tina.
Just very quickly, let me say this. There's a professor from Northern Arizona University that just released findings about 2 weeks ago. He's come here and taken soil samples north of the Trinity test site, and he found plutonium that has a Trinity footprint all the way in Truchas.
Oh my
So
God.
I know. So people don't realize. And he's going to now return in September and take samples south of the Trinity test site. But imagine there's plutonium from Trinity all the way to Truchas, New Mexico.